there are some member states in particular, those who carry weight, political weight, that have intentionally provided the political strategic support that has allowed Israel to continue to enjoy and benefit from its propaganda.
What's your message to Italy, your home country, and Germany, the two nations that are behind blocking joint EU action?
UK is one of those interesting cases of manufacturing where the political leadership has helped manufacture consensus.
Do you still have faith in international law?
I think the reason why international law fails is not because of inner limitations or default inadequacy.
Welcome to this episode of Expert Witness. I'm your host, Sondos Asem. Today, it's a pleasure to be joined by Francesca Albanese, the outspoken UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine. Francesca, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Francesca, it's been a year since we spoke, since our interview in London in November last year, when you were presenting the conclusions of your two reports on genocide in Gaza. So much has happened since then. Your opinion has been widely adopted by genocide scholars and legal scholars, human rights organizations, and most recently the UN's Commission of Inquiry on Palestine and Israel, which concluded that genocide has been and is still being committed in Gaza. And now you had to launch your latest report on third state complicity from South Africa due to the sanctions that have been imposed on you by the administration of US President Donald Trump. Can you first talk about the symbolism of that before we get to the findings of your latest report, given the US sanctions and the travel constraints that you've faced? Was the choice of South Africa symbolic of a wider shift from a US-centered system to a global South leadership in human rights? And what message did you intend to send?
I have to say that being in South Africa to deliver that report was a blessing in disguise, in the sense that it's frustrating as a UN expert not being able to travel to the UN headquarters, on top of suffering all sorts of limitations because of the sanctions. At the same time, it was so symbolic to have behind me the image of Nelson Mandela, where normally the UN logo would stand, because Nelson Mandela symbolizes humanity and the victory of humanity over the barbarism of racial segregation and apartheid. It's the victory of an entire country which, after many years of struggle and resistance, broke the chain of 350 years of colonialism, the last 50 of which have made history with the term apartheid.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, comrades, and friends. I'm deeply honored and humbled to stand here on the soil that gave Nelson Mandela and one of the greatest examples of liberation and of modern history.
But also, South Africa has been a land of slave trades. I mean, the reason why the South African population is so diverse is because diversity has also been brought by colonial powers. And what is beautiful about the South African people is that they managed to find unity in diversity. I was surprised, but positively surprised and refreshed to meet so much humanity and a great people, made me think that it's not a coincidence that eventually Nelson Mandela was born in that country. So is it at the same time, I do not think that beyond symbolism, we are ready to see this shift that I wish it was already happening, of the multipolar world sort of moving toward the global majority outside of the US or outside of Western influence. It's not there yet, but because it's still a very uneven world and world order, and I think that now for the first time there is a global awareness and global awakening to this.
Relatedly, you've strongly supported the Hague Group, which is an alliance or a bloc of 8 states from the global south that was launched in January of 2025, with the purpose of holding Israel accountable under international law. And South Africa and Colombia are the co-chairs of this group. How important is it, the Hague Group, in your view? And you've during your Nelson Mandela lecture in Johannesburg last week, you also talked about the beginning of a new multilateralism. Quoting you now, you mentioned that this multilateralism would challenge once more colonial and imperial power structures. Could you talk a little bit about that and why the Hague Group is significant in this regard?
Yes. First of all, the Hague Group is the first and only significant attempt at disrupting the order that allows Israel to continue the genocide and the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Because, of course, there have been other efforts. Look at the Trump plan. Or before it, the Gaza Riviera, or in parallel with it, the two-state conference chaperoned by France and Saudi Arabia, or think of the wave of tardy recognitions of the state of Palestine by the UK, France, and other Western states. There have been initiatives, but no initiative has aimed even vaguely at breaking the pattern of compliance. And the pattern of compliance can only be broken by cutting ties, economic, diplomatic, political ties with Israel. First and foremost, economic and military. This is the first thing. So the Hague Group does represent that. Second, the Hague Group holds an important promise, but it also presents challenges. The fact that after 1 year, 13 members only compose the Hague Group speaks to the limitations of change within the current world order. Why Western states, which have been so to speak more in favor of justice, more supportive of justice and accountability in Palestine, not be member of it, like Slovenia, Spain, Norway, Luxembourg, Belgium. Why not Ireland? So, this is the third point. Yes, the Hague Group signals a different way of carrying multilateral businesses and affairs, but it's a commitment that, in order to be delivered, must be supported by political will. And in order to have the political will to enforce the commitments made by the Hague Group, no ports, no arms, no no shelter to justice, to impunity. In order to have those three commitments, there shouldn't be opposition to the members of the Hague Group, while the retaliation and the pressure from the United States and Israel is enormous on South Africa, on Senegal, and on the other member states. So it's the usual tension between It seems to be between light and darkness, and I do hope that the light movement continues to grow, but it's not a given. It requires a lot of political courage and also support from the masses, the people within given countries.
Let me now turn to your latest report, Francesca. You were sanctioned in July, shortly after your scathing report, in which you named over 60 companies, including major US technology firms, for their involvement in what you described as the transformation of Israel's economy of occupation to an economy of genocide. And now you have clearly been undeterred by these sanctions, and you went on to investigate the role of 63 states for the collective crime, as you describe it, of enabling Israel's genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. Can you unpack the findings of your report for our audience, and why are you accusing so many states of complicity in genocide?
Yeah, Israel is very embedded, more than other states in the United Nations system, members of the United Nations system in the current global economy. Because of the because Israel is a producer of weapons and security surveillance spying systems, or because of it's a producer of technology that it's much needed and in high demand by all member states. And Israel is also an integral part of the US foreign policy. Israel and the US are so close in their, again, in their manifestation to the outside world, that it's sometimes their foreign interests are indistinguishable. And as they are chosen, not that I claim that Israel's interests are the same as the US, but their foreign policies align dramatically. In this embeddedness, it's very difficult to isolate Israel. And this is why I say that it's hadn't it been for the economic, political, military, and diplomatic strategic support that Israel enjoys, its crimes would have not been sustainable over such a long time. Israel has sustained 2 years of increasing criticism at the international level from the people, and still policies have not substantially shifted toward Israel. Yes, the BDS continues uh, to gain terrain, to gain momentum, and still member states protect Israel. Israel is still present in international fora like the UN, or competition like sport ones from FIBA, FIFA, UEFA, continues to be present as a country to cultural events like the film festival or the Biennale, art and culture, Eurovision, business as usual. All the more, very few states have cut economic ties and military ties with Israel. Very few. And measures are scant. There are member states that have done either or, either cut diplomatic ties or cut economic ties or military ties, while international law is very clear. Member states cannot maintain relations that translate into aiding and assisting a state that commits international crimes. And this is the thing. There are some member states in particular, those who carry weight, political weight, that have intentionally provided the political strategic support that has allowed Israel to continue to enjoy and benefit from its propaganda, that it was fighting a legitimate war against an existential threat. All the Palestinians somewhat are responsible for what Israel has suffered on October 7. The narrative in the West has remained stuck on October 7. Even today, after 70,000 people are certain dead, we still talk about October 7. And not because it's not important, but because what about the destruction of Gaza? The destruction of Gaza has been justified. Hadn't it been for this system of complacency and complicity, the genocide would have stopped years ago.
Speaking of complicity and the states that you've accused in your report of aiding or being complicit in the genocide, I would like to highlight your findings on the UK in particular, where I'm based right now. In your report, you said that the United Kingdom has played a key role in military collaboration with Israel despite internal opposition. From its bases in Cyprus, the UK has enabled a crucial US supply line to Tel Aviv and flown over 600 surveillance missions over Gaza throughout the genocide, sharing intelligence with Israel. Flight numbers and durations, often coinciding with major Israeli operations, suggest detailed knowledge and cooperation in the destruction of Gaza, extending beyond hostage rescue. That's from your latest report. And Francesca, I'd like to hear from you on what the UK is expected to do as concrete steps in order to refrain from being complicit in the genocide.
Yeah, the UK is one of those interesting cases of manufacturing where the political leadership has helped manufacture consensus around the war that Israel has unleashed against the Gaza population. I've heard the current prime minister, when he was the leader of the opposition, saying that the curtailing of essential services was justified, was in Israel's prerogatives, which is absolutely incorrect from a legal point of view. So, the narrative has been such that has justified what Israel has done, which amounts to the commission of crimes. Also, the current prime minister has used his credentials as a lawyer who's an expert on genocide because he has litigated genocide cases before the International Court of Justice to dismiss that in Gaza there was an ongoing genocide, which somewhat is at odds with what he should know, that the moment the International Court of Justice has recognized the risk of irreparable harm to the Palestinian people in Gaza under the Genocide Convention, there is an obligation for member states to intervene, therefore not to aid and assist in the commission of what could plausibly be a genocide. So it's not ignorance, it's willful participation into the creation of the conditions that have enabled the genocide, that have allowed the genocide to continue. So the political support, the discursive support, but also the measures that have been taken. These are indirect ways to support Israel's conduct. The measures taken to punish civil society active against the genocide. I do not dispute that the methods used by Palestine Action might cause damage. I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that they might trespass what is legally acceptable. But framing this as terrorism is beyond what terrorism is and constitutes. And the fact that the government makes a deliberate choice to target civil society action as terrorists or to go after journalists who are investigating the genocide on the charge of terrorism, while continuing to support the state that practices terror against a virtually defenseless population creates a climate of complicity, speaks to a climate of complicity.
Given the evidence of complicity of the UK that you have presented in your report, Francesca, do you think there is enough evidence to bring a case against the United Kingdom at the ICJ, similar to the case that Nicaragua has brought against Germany for complicity in genocide or for breaching the Genocide Convention?
I think that there is enough evidence to prompt the collection, to prompt an investigation that might allow national actors to decide whether they can carry forward an action or not. So frankly, I cannot make this assessment on my own because I did collect some evidence, not all evidence, because I don't even have access to UK sources. So bear in mind, I used open source material to put together the framework. But I definitely think that it's worth investigating. And there are already parliamentary inquiries or inquiries led by member of parliament in the UK to this extent. I would also not, in order to have a case before the ICJ, you need to have a state taking action against the UK. But you can also have national domestic proceedings judicial proceedings against figures who have authorized certain acts or who have omitted to take responsibility on given measures. Again, I do believe that it's about time for the justice system to put itself at work.
And turning now to the EU, which you've also addressed in your report, around mid-September, the EU Commission proposed the suspension of the trade-related pillar of the EU Association Agreement, which is the deal that governs political and diplomatic relations between Israel and the EU. And yet, Israel remains the EU's largest trade partner. And apparently there is a stumbling block to this suspension. Basically, the suspension of the free trade provisions in the association agreement would require the approval of a qualified majority of the 27 EU members, which is also known as a double majority rule of at least 55% of member states and 65% of the EU population. And this may sound a little bit technical, but effectively it means that it would require Italy or Germany to support the bid. And so far, the two nations have yet to approve any proposal to sanction Israel during the genocide. So, because of the failure to suspend the association agreement or its free trade pillar, some nations within the EU, like Slovenia and Spain, have taken their own concrete steps individually. For example, to sanction Israel by imposing a full arms embargo, or to sanction Israeli officials. So do you welcome these individual or independent steps taken by states like Spain and Slovenia? And do you think this should be the way forward for European states to take action on their own rather than as the EU, as a bloc?
Yeah, definitely. This is something I've argued various times. International law is not superseded. International law, peremptory norms of international law that cannot be derogated, take precedence over regional agreements. So it seems to me that the European Union and its trade agreements are used to circumvent something that could not be circumvented, which is the compliance with international law, with the prevention, with the obligation to prevent genocide, for example. There is a clear decision, a clear statement by the International Court of Justice in the case of Nicaragua versus Germany that reminds member states not to transfer weapons, including components, to states who might commit violations of international humanitarian law. So we even have a lower threshold that is indicated by the court. So member states should stop trading weapons, transferring weapons, buying weapons. I mean, by Israel. So this is enough, and it obliges states. So the fact that using the European Union as an excuse, as a finger behind which to hide, is quite hypocritical. And in any case, it doesn't spare these states and their governments from accountability. It shouldn't, at least.
What's your message to Italy, your home country, and Germany, the two nations that are behind blocking joint EU action with respect to the association agreement with Israel?
That they don't miss an opportunity to make the wrong choices in history. These two countries have individually the highest responsibility to prevent genocide, given particularly Germany for its record. Germany has already brought havoc upon Europe and beyond once in history, and is not contributing to avoid and to prevent another genocide. And Italy is following suit. It's a very sad coincidence that 1 century later, these two countries are still on the wrong side of history. But what I tell them is comply with your international obligations. Otherwise, you and your government officials will have to face consequences. And this is why I'm so reassured that, at least in Italy, there is a responsible and conscientious civil society who's taking legal action against government officials, against companies. I'm not aware of similar actions in Germany, but also Italy is. There is a turmoil in the country at the moment. There are several strikes that have been declared, that continue to be declared. There is a huge strike that is upcoming this month on the 28th and 29th of November. And it's very important that citizens, ordinary citizens, keep on protesting and direct their strikes toward ports and other places from which weapons are transferred to to Israel. Sorry, Italy is also in violation of a quite stringent law on arms trade, and there should. I mean, this is why those involved should face consequences.
Well, concerning accountability and consequences for breaches of international law, the ICC so far has only issued 2 arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, and although we know from our sources that other arrest warrants should have been underway but have not been filed due to the threat of sanctions. It's unclear whether the ICC will go ahead with any more arrest warrants. So what's your message to ICC prosecutors and judges given the threat of sanctions? Should they defy the sanctions and continue their investigations and seek arrest warrants for what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank?
Yeah, of course, they should continue to investigate and issue arrest warrants for those who appear to be committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. I've been advocating for for greater action, greater leadership by the ICC for a long time, because I think that ministers who are directly responsible for instigating crimes against the Palestinians includes the use of torture and other cruel and degrading treatments against prisoners, they should not be in position of power, and so they do. And ministers who are responsible for the annexation or continue to advance the annexation of large swathes of Palestinian territory should not be in position of power, not unchallenged. So, of course, there should be justice. I also understand how, I mean, the chilling effect that the wave of sanctions against the judges and prosecutors of the International Criminal Court might have on anyone. I do understand because I do see that on myself. And at the same time, are we going to bend backward because of this mafia style system that is eroding the very foundation of the international justice system? I think that in that system itself, there has been so much work and sacrifice of so many lives before ours that if we have chosen this path, our own personal situation shouldn't count much. It's there is a greater call to make here, and I do hope that the International Criminal Court will be able to withhold pressure and stand tall in the face of adversities.
And what do you make, Francesca, of the fact that a number of European countries like Italy, France, and Greece, all of them are members of the ICC, have allowed the airplane of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to fly over or use their airspace several times since the warrants by the ICC? It was only in his last trip to the UN General Assembly in New York when he avoided French airspace. So are these states violating international law by allowing Netanyahu's overflight, and would it make them complicit?
Yes, allowing their own airspace to be used by someone who's wanted by the International Criminal Court is a violation of the international justice system's rules, and should face it should be followed by consequences. And so the question is, the International Criminal Court seems under enough pressure today not to want to take more. I would understand that, but at the same time, the international justice system operates and does so successfully if complementarity works. And this is why I think that now more than ever, the role of domestic courts is critical. This is why I do welcome the proceedings started in a number of countries against governments who have authorized the use of national airspace for the ICC wanted Israeli Prime Minister's airplane.
Francesca, I want to hear from you on the Gaza plan, or so-called peace plan by Donald Trump, and what has happened since the ceasefire. Only 3 weeks ago, Trump, accompanied by some 20 world leaders, including Arab leaders and Western leaders, announced from Egypt that the war on Gaza was over. Yet there have been almost daily violations of the ceasefire in Gaza, and hundreds of Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks. So in light of the findings of your report on third state complicity, what's your assessment of the plan by Donald Trump and the implementation of the ceasefire so far, And is the plan and the subsequent conduct an entrenchment of international law violations against Palestinians? And in a nutshell, has the genocide ended with this ceasefire deal, or is it still ongoing?
Um, I've been critical of this plan since its very inception, in the sense that everyone welcomes the ceasefire. I couldn't be happier to hear the announcement that the Israeli hostages and a significant number of Palestinian prisoners and hostages would be released. Not many Palestinian hostages, because most Palestinians detained without charge, without trial, are still there, like Dr. Abu Safie and many other medical personnel and journalists. The point is that the ceasefire has not been respected. Israel has violated 130 times the ceasefire in about 3 weeks now, and continues. It has killed more than 200 Palestinians. You know, we are so numbed by the continuous daily death of the Palestinians that those almost doesn't change our perception of the reality. But these are human beings and continue to die on an everyday basis. And aid has not entered. Israeli presence continues. Plus, what they present as a peace plan has nothing to do with peace. Israel, the only way to peace is to respect the basic rules of international law that command Israel to withdraw the occupation, to dismantle the colonies, and to offer reparations to the Palestinians for the crimes it has committed.
One of your recommendations, Francesca, in your latest report on third state complicity was to act under the Uniting for Peace resolution, in line with the General Assembly resolution that dates back to 1950, which allows the United Nations General Assembly to act when the UN Security Council is deadlocked because of a veto power by any of its permanent members. Can you talk more about this mode of intervention and whether you think it's realistic now as a way of stopping the genocide?
I do think that it's very important that member states gather and find a way to overcome the impasse. And at the same time, they seem to lack very much the political will to do that. I do see, for example, I don't know how serious it is, how determinant it is, but I do see that the let's say the non-aligned movement is not what it was during the decolonization period. I see that Africa, the support for Palestine in African countries has been fragmented, has been lost. Is it because of the spreading of Christian Zionism? Is it because of the spreading of Israel's influence or Israel-US influence in the region? I have no idea. Sure fact is that it's more difficult to gather to unite member states around the question of Palestine beyond rhetoric. This is a critical impression I have, although it's just a matter of time, I believe, because the wind is, I mean, the tide has shifted, and so the wind. And I do believe that it's a matter of time before also popular movement will make this change. Of course, it's going to be very challenging because today the world is also confronted with powerful states and powerful actors who control means of containment, oppression and repression and destruction typical of the 21st century. So it's going to be tough. If it doesn't look better, it will look much, much uglier.
Francesca, what are you planning to investigate next?
Torture and other cruel and degrading treatment post October 7. just another light topic for my collection of horrors. And but at the same time, I think I owe it to the survivors to have a proper investigation on it and any trends and patterns that have emerged. Because, I wanted to investigate the role of the media. And this is something that remains a priority. At the same time, there are better actors who are better placed than me to do that. Bringing the question of torture as such within the UN literature is fundamental also to pursue justice, to advance justice in domestic courts. And this is why I felt compelled to investigate it, given the proportions it has reached over the past 2 years.
Francesca, I want to close with it may be a personal note, but also your own view on international law and its effectiveness. Do you still have faith in international law? And also, if you have a message to those aspiring to study or practice international law, I'm sure you're a role model for many. Is it worth it? And how can they make a difference given the apparent failure of international courts to prosecute the most powerful and the overall non-compliance of states with international law?
Look, it's like asking a doctor whether he or she has faith in medicine, in the medicine he or she applies when medicine fails. Of course, medicine fails, but might fail because of limitations in what we know, in the application of medical practice. And here, I think the reason why international law fails is not because of inner limitations or default inadequacy. It's because of a lack of enforcement. So we need more principled leaders and principled legal practitioners working in the pursuit of justice. So less corporate lawyers or more principled corporate lawyers, more principled diplomats, more principled. Really, it's about, I mean, a genocide doesn't require intelligence, it requires courage. So for me, it's not about having faith. International law is it's what I know, it's my principal instrument and toolbox of work. So I do keep on thinking that we should try to make it work. Because as I said, it's the last remnants of an international order ruled by peace and not by war and not by might makes right.
Thank you very much, Francesca, for your time today. I appreciate it.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
Bye.